This is the short version of Mac and Martha's month-long visit to Australia and its plucky next-door neighbor, New Zealand. If you want the long version, well, just ask us. Understand, these are our highlights, not necessarily the ones in the tour brochure. Okay? Let's go. We arrived in Sydney, Australia, October 28, 2019, following a 17-hour plane ride from Dallas, Texas. This was our group from Holiday Vacations, led by the one, the only Vicki Reed. She herded us out of the airport, off the plane, through Sydney Harbor, onto a boat for a cruise. The only way to fight jet lag is to just keep moving and stay awake. We got to look at the famous Sydney Opera House from the water, as well as the Harbor Bridge. It's the longest single-span bridge in the world. People pay hundreds of dollars to walk on top of this bridge. We did not. Sydney and its large inner harbor are home to some 70 beaches and some very nice homes, as well as parks and walks, docks, and lots of watercraft. The next day we got a closer look at Sydney by land, exploring the peaceful parks along the waterfront. This is Mrs. Macquarie's chair, cut in the shape of a bench by convicts in 1810 for the wife of the governor of New South Wales. There was a haze in the sky over Sydney, the result of many brush fires burning to the north and west. We also took a quick trip to Bondi Beach, famed center for surfing in Australia. This day the surf was more down than up, but there were still things to see. And we returned to the Sydney Opera House. Like a lot of public buildings, it has a history of delays and cost overruns. It was bid at $7 million. It cost $102 million by the time it was finished. A lottery paid for it. The Opera House is covered by more than 1 million Swedish-made tiles, making it glisten. There are 7 theaters on site, ranging from the big concert hall to modest venues, but there are 3,000 events held here yearly. That night, Martha and I returned to see Much Ado About Nothing. In one of the theaters, Shakespeare not performed with an Australian accent. But the next morning, we flew north 1,200 miles to subtropical Queensland and Cairns. There was a visit to the Aboriginal Culture Park, where we learned, among other things, we don't know how to throw a boomerang. Or why. We did get a real appreciation for Aboriginal art, though. The next day, it's the 6th if you're keeping track of this, we got on a boat and headed for the Great Barrier Reef. It was an all-day event on a barge anchored above the reef. Highlights included a helicopter ride. We also took a glass-bottom boat ride and went snorkeling above the reef. We both got to wear these stylish outfits. We'd never snorkeled in the ocean before. Waves and salt water make it a lot less fun than on a calm lake, but still, a fun adventure we won't forget. Day 7 saw us on a train excursion inside Barron Gorge National Park. Starting in the valley and heading up to the mountain, the view got more exotic. The track had been laid to reach tin miners in 1891, but now serves for tourists looking for pictures of waterfalls and gorges. By the end of the ride, lunch and some shopping, and then back down the mountain, but this time on a nearly 5-mile gondola track. Then back to Cairns and the Pacific Hotel. A word about Cairns. Lovely ocean resort town filled with restaurants, lots of attractions, including a shallow pool for kids and adults, and a colony of large fruit bats, which make a nightly visit at dusk to search for food. The bats don't get mentioned in the tourist brochure, but they are interesting. We left the hotel the next morning, flying to Brisbane, capital of Queensland. We toured that city of 2.5 million and viewed the local landmarks, the flora, the fauna. There's a fauna right now. It's a beautiful city, but we were headed inland to Lamington National Park. O'Reilly's Rainforest Retreat. O'Reilly's also runs a winery, so a stop on the way was necessary for folks to take a taste. Then it was up into the mountains, and we did that along a one-lane winding road to the retreat. The O'Reillys have been living up here for generations. That retreat offers bird watching, bird feeding, treetop hiking, Billy Tea in the wilderness, hot tubs, Segway tours, and zip lining. These are our appropriate outfits for zip lining. And this is Martha zipping. There was an outdoor dinner our last night at O'Reilly's retreat, with some of the group and a lot of the birds eating their food. Lots of our food. Did we mention they have amazing sunsets at the mountains of O'Reilly's? The next day we were off to the Monaco Resort in Caloundra, probably our nicest accommodations on this tour, one-bedroom apartments above the Pacific. Yes, we tried out the hot tub as well. But Caloundra is near the Australia Zoo, created by Steve Irwin. Our first stop, the Animal Hospital, where work was taking place on a koala burned in one of the brush fires. Some sea turtles, also in for treatment. This one's only got 3 legs. Then it was off to the Crocoseum for a display of Aussie birds which fly around the stadium. And of course there was a crocodile. Here's what we learned. The crocodiles will not eat you. They will kill you because you're in their water, but you're not their food of choice. Good news. Later, we toured the zoo, which lets you get right up close to some of the animals. Martha was hesitant to touch the kangaroo, not sure where he'd been. I was less so. You do get close to some of the animals. Others, well, probably not a good idea. And yes, the meerkats are amazingly cute. On our last day with the group, we went on an eco-cruise around the waters of the town of Noosa. It's a place of multi-million-dollar homes on the waterfront, and some folks having a party under a bridge. Officially, it's a UNESCO Biosphere site, teeming with fish and fowl and plant life. The next day, we waved goodbye to our tour group and flew south to Merimbula, that's south of Sydney. That's where Martha's German sister from her college days lives. Zilka and her husband Hans immigrated 40 years ago from Germany to Australia, along with Zilka's sister Birgit and her husband Joe. So Birgit and Joe were happened to be visiting, so it was a happy reunion for Martha and some new friends for me. We spent several days visiting with them, also stopping by a killer whale museum and taking a tour of oyster farming with Captain Sponge, a local oyster farmer. We also visited with local Rotarians. From Merimbula, we flew to Uluru. That's the big red rock in the middle of the Australian outback. We had morning and evening viewings, walks in the desert, and yes, by the way, it really is red out there. We got close to nature. Like flies, they're a problem. This is our official anti-fly wear for the outback. We walked a dry riverbed while others took a walk on the rim of the canyon. These are the 500 steps up to get to the rim. No thank you. The ranches out here are called cattle stations. They can beat 2 million acres. Because with only shrub grass to eat, each cow needs a couple of hundred acres just to survive. The stations offer gasoline, food, souvenirs, and a variety of other things to make money to survive. Our visit to Alice Springs, a town of 20,000 in the middle of the outback, gave us a chance to see the headquarters of the Royal Flying Doctors. They offer medical care and advice over a huge area. And we visited the School of the Air. It offers grade school lessons over the internet to students all across the outback. A few times a year, the students come into Alice Springs and meet their classmates. From the outback, we flew 4,000 miles to Christchurch, New Zealand on the South Island. There, we rented a car and headed south. New Zealand is green, neat, and tidy, especially after coming from the hot red center of Australia. There are lovely people and about 30 million sheep. That's not a guess, that's an estimate. They also have penguins. We stopped in Umaru to witness the March of the Little Blue Penguins. And each evening, just after dark, these little blue penguins swim ashore, climb the rocks, and quickly cross the parade area and head back to their nests. Martha has lifelong friends in New Zealand from her 4-H days, so we stayed with one of her old friends, Heather Robinson, in Invercargill. She drove us down to Bluff. That's about as far south as you can go in New Zealand. Next stop is Antarctica. Really. We also visited the beach where Burt Munro raced his Indian motorcycle. There's a statue of Burt and his bike in the city park. He's the most famous Invercargill resident. See the movie with Anthony Hopkins, World's Fastest Indian. You'll understand about this. We also visited with one of Martha's young cousins and her husband, as well as daughter Kate's old roommate from New York, and stayed a night with another old friend, David Howe, and his wife Diane in Cromwell. On the way back to Christchurch, we stopped to gaze at the 11,000-foot-high Mount Cook. Even from miles away across a huge lake, it's inspiring. And we stopped briefly at the home of bungee jumping on the historic Kawarau Bridge near Queenstown. For $30, you can jump off this bridge into the deep gorge, while cameras catch your every moment of doubt, hesitation, or fear. If you pay for it, you can fall far enough to touch the river at the bottom. No, we didn't. But it's something to come back for.
Well, no bungee jumping for me. But from the Red Centre of Australia to the Green Hills of New Zealand, and because of all the sights and all the friendly people we met in both countries, I'd go back in a heartbeat. It was a trip of a lifetime.